flying to the South Pole, crossing the transantarctic mountains yields hundreds of miles of flat plateau and icy emptiness. Beneath the wings of a C-130 with skis, thick rivers of endlessly blowing snow make the landscape feel like an alien world. Then, a speck in the distance. So small, it could very well be dirt on the window. And then it resolves into dirt on the window. It's a long flight. But ultimately, a dot on the horizon resolves into this building on stilts, surrounded by nothing to distinguish it. A human presence so far south, so far away from civilization that the cares of the world might as well be a planet away. Located at 90 degrees south, this is Amundsen Scott's South Pole Research Station, or if you want to sound like a local, just Pole. I spent a summer here as a U.S. Antarctic Program Principal Investigator. And back in that time frame, late 2018, early 2019, maybe 1 out of 10 people would have experienced this level of isolation in their personal lives. But today it's 10 out of 10. Thanks to COVID-19, every one of you knows what it's like to be separated from the world. Most of you weren't isolated alone. You were in your home with a few people and the rest of the world was behind a screen. You and your family were a bubble, a unit, a crew. The same has been true for deployed crews at the South Pole of our planet for decades now. In the brutal cold at 90 South, I learned 2 important lessons about how to be happy in the modern world. But thanks to the pandemic, all of you have a little glimpse into what it might be like to live at the South Pole. Now, I'm a planetary scientist by trade. I don't say astrophysicist anymore because there's this condition where I say astrophysicist and some people hear astrologer. I use techniques from a field of study called astroseismology, which again sounds like a mouthful of peanut butter, and I just tried to say astrology again. But that's what took me down to the bottom of the world. Astroseismology, not peanut butter. And if there's one thing to know about me, it's this. I love the warmth. I grew up in Southern California, right by the beach. I went to college in Daytona Beach and Santa Cruz, and when I got the call telling me I was going to the South Pole, as you've heard, I was sitting at my AFRL desk in Maui, Hawaii. So yeah, I went from Maui to McMurdo Station on the coast of Antarctica, the California of Antarctica, if you will. McMurdo's a beach town. You know, in the way that Manhattan's an affordable place to live. You have to look really hard and be a little delusional to believe it. From here, it was on to the very bottom of the world. This is the ceremonial South Pole, a place so far south that if I did this, I would have just walked through every longitude on Earth, around the world in just a few steps. I took this picture right after I landed at the South Pole. It's the bravest picture I've ever taken, and I took a sigh just remembering it because it feels like negative 77 Fahrenheit in this picture. And I still took my ski mask off, apparently to prove that I can both smile and do something stupid at the same time. I looked up the temperature in Maui the day I landed at the South Pole, because apparently I hate myself, and it was plus 80 Fahrenheit. It's hard to envision what 157 degrees colder really is, so here's a visual aid. Those chunks of ice on my eyelashes, by the way, that's after 10 minutes of thawing indoors. Enough to wilt any California soul. But here's the first thing I learned from life at the South Pole. Happiness is the little things. All around us, every day, we're surrounded by small moments that have the potential to make us happy. Like a smile or a beat on the radio or a good hair day or a really funny bad hair day. But the problem is we've moved the goalposts for happiness so far past these things because we're used to them. Living at the pole showed me I needed to move those way back and relish the little things. Like freshies in the cafeteria. Freshies are fresh fruits and vegetables. They're flown in from New Zealand on a ski plane, if there's room, which there frequently isn't. And you can't grow your own freshies because the Antarctic Treaty forbids growing any living organism that isn't native to the continent, which includes yeast, by the way, making Antarctica the only place where homebrewing beer is an international treaty violation. At Pole, an ordinary orange had the power to make me happy because it was the first time in days I hadn't eaten frozen, canned something. Happiness is the little things. A heater made my California soul real happy. A glass of absolutely awful box wine. I mean, the stuff that's basically flavored Windex made me happy because someone chose to share it with me. Turns out that's really key when the nearest bar is 2,000 miles away, so make friends. Here's another example, water. Water is a precious resource at the South Pole because it takes fuel to turn ice into water, and there's only so much fuel to go around for a season. So everyone at Pole is restricted to 2-minute showers just twice a week. Before Pole, shower was a chore. At Pole, yeah, hot shower made me happy, which is a good thing because it certainly didn't make me clean. Fast forward to coming back to the US and it's the pandemic. And just like everyone, I'm getting dragged down by it all, not motivated to do much. But from my time and experience at Pole, I knew that I had to make a conscious effort to look around for the things I took for granted. And when I found them, spend that 1 or 2 minutes to remind myself that I could be happy and that those little things could make me happy. So often, when we experience fleeting happiness, we do all we can to make it less fleeting. But in doing so, we just make ourselves less happy. That small moment to put the world aside and enjoy a glass of wine, a hot shower, or even just an all-American YouTube video of Dane Cook getting drop-kicked in the face by a kangaroo, take that moment. There's actually no video of Dane Cook getting drop-kicked by a kangaroo, but it made me happy, made someone in the audience happy for a moment as well. And that's the point. We need those little victories. My time at Pole was a blip compared to some of the folks that I deployed with. One gentleman I met had spent 20 winters down there. 20. What motivates him to keep coming back? It's not the money, it's not the views, it's just ice and blowing snow in every direction. After 20 years, it's not the uniqueness of the location anymore, so what is it? The average work week at Pole is 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. These are engineers, nurses, scientists, mechanics, people who could be successful doing what they do anywhere else for less pay, for more pay, and less misery. So what keeps them coming back to Antarctica? The answer to that question is the second thing that I learned from the South Pole. Shared suffering breeds teamwork. I came alone, a team of one, and I knew no one at Pole when I arrived. No internet, no tech experts to help me how to figure out to fix things that didn't work. I got frostnip in 4 fingers, which turns out is like the junior varsity version of frostbite. Every day, I had to drag this sled with my generator and gasoline and equipment out from the station to this lonely piece of ice where I had my telescope. Some days, that sled weighed 200 pounds. Every day, I had to mush, literally jerk from the left to the right to break my sled out of the ice. Doing so when it's 50 below, for a quarter-mile journey, half-mile round trip, well, that was enough to make me miserable, at least. And yet, despite that, why was the day I left the South Pole one of the saddest days of my life? Because by the time I left, I was no longer an expedition of one. Instead of the bleak misery and suffering I expected in Antarctica, I found happiness in the little things. I found teamwork, this strange camaraderie in shared suffering. So let me take you back to South Pole Station and the galley kitchen there. After the meal rush, I noticed some of the more experienced polies would slip into the kitchen and start working in the dish pit. These scientists, nurses, snowcat drivers would clean as many as 100 plates after every meal. But why? There's a kitchen staff whose job it is to clean the plates. I asked this question and got a shockingly simple answer. If I do the dishes when I have spare time, I'm putting time back in someone's day. Someone will put time back in my day. The environment at the South Pole calls you to become the kind of person who can put your misery aside. Not forget it, just put it aside. Walk up to a struggling crewmate and say, I'm here, you're here, this sucks. Let's do this. Let's do this together. When you're on an expedition and the going is tough, people are pushing hard and kind of miserable, you can make life easier on the people around you by pitching in when you don't have to. And anyone who weathered the pandemic with a significant other knows this. When you take something off your teammate's plate, it makes a difference. This mentality is somehow instilled without any formal training into the polies that keep coming back to Antarctica year after year. And after 2 weeks, I bought in. I was in there in the dish pit doing dishes as well. I actually met most of the station in the dish pit. People I might not have crossed paths with or gotten to know otherwise, like the gentleman who maintained miles of heating pipes buried in these really cool ice tunnels deep underneath the station. Or the logistics woman who managed the snow vehicles. And one day, maybe about a week or so after I started showing up in the dish pit, I'm out in the cold, strapping into my harness and sled, and that logistics woman drives up with a snowmobile. It was like the heavens parting. And she said, "Let me drag that for you." By the time I left Pole, I was no longer an expedition of one. Shared suffering breeds teamwork. It forges that human connection in the midst of isolation. And I brought that lesson back with me from Antarctica to life at the lab, life during the pandemic, life after. Shared suffering can be a call to be a certain kind of expeditionary person and an opportunity to find similar people. People with whom you can say, "I'm here, you're here. This sucks. Let's do this together, and I'll see you on the other side of this." There's a saying at Pole. There's only two types of people who come back from Antarctica. People who went once and never again. Whatever they found down there, whatever they learned about themselves in the isolation and the cold, they didn't like, and they'll never be back. People of the second kind faced the elements, struggled, conquered, and got hooked on that feeling of conquering. The isolation made them stronger. And as I look back on my time in Antarctica, I do feel like it made me stronger, more calm in the face of chaos, better able to handle the stresses of lockdown. So as we all look back on that time in lockdown and the pandemic, let's ask ourselves, just as I did when I flew away from Antarctica, what did I learn from my time in isolation? Moving forward, can we be more like the Polies who keep going back, better able to withstand the stresses of life by finding happiness in the little things and building bridges with people around us every day? I'd like to think that we can use the South Pole as a framework with which to make ourselves stronger, more connected, and more present. I'm still a California guy who hates the cold at heart, but for that, sign me up to go back any day. Thank you.